Can Jake Paul beat Anthony Joshua? Surely this would be a demolition job for Anthony Joshua. Is Jake Paul a credible opponent or just a YouTube boxer? Does this fight affect the credibility of boxing? Does the fight actually happen, or is it simply a clever piece of marketing? With the lines between sport and entertainment increasingly blurred. But what would happen if they fought? Let's discuss this further.
Now, Jake Paul, he deserves respect. He deserves a lot of respect. But now, I've got to give Jake Paul some credit for a variety of reasons. Number one, he's self-made. And when he made the transition from YouTuber to boxer, he trained phenomenally hard and he invested in having a good team. That deserves respect. Also, he's had some good victories over fighters. Anderson Silva, Nate Diaz. These were good fighters. At one point, these were great fighters. Now, I use the word fighters, not boxers, because these are fighters. You know, Anderson Silva was a great champion, but he was a UFC fighter, a UFC champion, not a boxer. So, in one sense, you have to give Jake Paul credit for going in the ring against fighters. Obviously, when he's gone in the ring against boxers, we had the Mike Tyson situation, which, from a monetary perspective, was phenomenal. From a hype perspective, was phenomenal. But as a boxing match, it's almost like the hype brought it up here, but then the actual fight brought it down here. The fight was never going to live up to the expectation, and that expectation was for Tyson to rewind the clock and become what he was, which was the baddest man in the planet. Of course, when Mike Tyson was young, he was ruthless. He had the head movement. He had that fast left hook. Ask Frank Bruno. Ask Trevor Berbick. He had those uppercuts were just, he used to throw it was like the right hook to the body or the right uppercut to the body and then the right uppercut to the head. Serious stuff. If he gets in position to throw that punch, you are in trouble. And his knockouts were chilling, but there was a mystique to Mike Tyson in his prime. He was scary. He was intimidating. And a lot of people at the time would say that psychologically he beat opponents before he got in the ring with them. So he'd mastered the psychological element of boxing, and also he was a student of the game. He obviously had the tutelage of the late Cus D'Amato, the great Cus D'Amato, and he studied fighters. Mike Tyson knows about boxing. He knows about strategy. But this was like living off his name. And a lot of people didn't really like the event. But hey ho, Mike Tyson made a lot of money. Jake Paul made a lot of money. And it was an event. It was a story. Now, there is something that isn't being discussed. We're going to talk about the Anthony Joshua fight in a minute. But there is something that hasn't been discussed. And that is the narrative. And I think it's the correct narrative. That Jake Paul has been amazing for female boxing. I repeat, Jake Paul has been amazing for female boxing. Now, if you take a fighter like Serrano, again, a great female fighter, he gave Serrano a platform. He raised her profile, and got her a phenomenal paycheck. Now, when Serrano fought Katie Taylor the second time, she got paid $8 million. That's according to the stats that I saw. Within the female boxing financial context, that is absolutely unbelievable. So with regards to female boxing, in terms of getting more eyes on female boxing, so again, looking at the Serrano situation, she fought on the Mike Tyson undercard. So there was millions of eyes that would have been drawn to that spectacular fight between Serrano and Katie Taylor. So he's brought attention to female boxing. He's brought more money to female boxing. And he should be credited with that. And he's also provided an investment to female boxing. And he's fought for, equal pay. And he should get credited for that. I haven't really heard him get the credit that he deserved for that. But despite all of that, can he beat Anthony Joshua? I guess there's two questions here. There's, can he beat Anthony Joshua, and will he beat Anthony Joshua? Now, generally speaking, Anthony Joshua would absolutely destroy Jake Paul, because one's a YouTuber that's turned into a respectable boxer, and the other is a two-time heavyweight champion of the world. So if you just look at it on the base level, Anthony Joshua goes in there, he destroys him. The one thing that we need to give Jake Paul is that he will have supreme motivation if this fight is granted. He will train immensely and he will be up for it. The scenario where Anthony Joshua becomes unstuck is a scenario where Anthony Joshua doesn't train properly for the fight. Looking at Anthony Joshua, he looks like he's a fairly regimented person. He looks like he's someone who always comes in physically great shape. Maybe not always mentally great shape, but it looks like he always comes in physically in great shape. But for Jake Paul to be victorious in that fight, it would be, I don't know, would it damage boxing? Would it damage the credibility of boxing? I mean, put it this way, when Ngannou fought Tyson Fury, I think Tyson Fury underestimated Ngannou. He's never directly said that, but I think he did underestimate Ngannou. And Ngannou gave a very impressive performance, raising his credibility. So Ngannou did two things here. He made a lot of money, loads of money, because in boxing there is a lot of money, and he raised his credibility. But when he fought Anthony Joshua, because of the Tyson Fury performance, Anthony Joshua would have taken him seriously, would have committed to having a proper camp as if he was fighting for the heavyweight championship of the world. And because he took it seriously and because he was razor sharp, he absolutely obliterated Ngannou. But that was because Ngannou had raised his profile and was seen as a genuine, legitimate threat based on the performance against Tyson Fury. It would be interesting to see Anthony Joshua's perspective if a Jake Paul fight was to materialize. Again, there's other questions, and I guess the ethical question is, should a fight of this, should Jake Paul be allowed to fight Anthony Joshua? Some people may say, is he qualified to fight Anthony Joshua? And I say that with all due respect, because the one thing that we've mentioned, Jake Paul has done loads for he's done loads for female boxing. He's done loads, and it hasn't been acknowledged. He's also had some success against some great fighters. Okay, they've been past their prime, but the fact that he was essentially a YouTuber that is willing to put it all on the line, go into the ring and fight these tough guys, even if they're past their prime, they're still tough. They still have years and years and years of experience of fighting, and he's willing to put it all on the line. You've got to respect that. You have to respect that. And I feel like Jake Paul doesn't get enough credit. But even with that said, even if you credit his mental strength, even if you credit the fact that he takes it seriously, even if you credit the fact that he's got a great team behind him, and he does have a great team behind him, and even if you credit some of the victories he's had against legitimate fighters, maybe not legitimate boxers, but legitimate fighters, is he still a credible opponent for Anthony Joshua? That's a good question. This fight would be a big fight. Why would it be a big fight? Because they're both massive. There's massive machines behind both. They're both so big in not only the boxing world, but in the quote-unquote real world. Everyone generally knows who Anthony Joshua is. everyone generally knows who Jake Paul is. So when you put those two entities together, and these are two entities that know how to market fights, then you're going to get a spectacle. You're going to get a situation that people might condemn, but they're still going to watch. Similar to the Mike Tyson situation, you've got the brand of Mike Tyson. You know, the 30-year, 40-year brand of Mike Tyson, which is a huge brand, and he's still relevant today. Still relevant today. So you put that, and then you've got the brand of Jake Paul. And Jake Paul is a massive brand, and then you get a spectacle. You know, it wasn't a good fight, but you get people tuning in. They want to see it. And that will be similar for this fight if it materializes. Obviously, you'd have to put your money on Anthony Joshua, but you can't underestimate the mental strength of Jake Paul, because he's shown throughout his career, whether it's in the YouTube world or the boxing world, that he's a mentally very strong person. So, and that mental strength, that will take you very, very far. So I guess, you know, we'll watch this space, but I think it's important that with boxing, that the matches that materialize, yes, boxing is a business, and under capitalism, a business has to make money. But also it's important not to put on fights that can damage the credibility and the reputation of the sport. Now, I'm not saying that this fight would do that, but I'm saying that when promoters and teams put fights on, it's always important to look at, I guess this is kind of like a clumsy way of saying it, but like the greater good, because the greater good is the credibility of boxing. And the boxing purists, the boxing public, that means something. And it's important to try and maintain that credibility. Definitely important. And who knows? Maybe this is just marketing for both parties. Maybe they will never fight. But if it did happen, a lot of people will be tuning in, and it would be an absolutely enormous event.